You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. Hey guys, what's going on? It's Vince with Antler and Feather Co. and welcome back to another Antler and Feather Co. podcast, the podcast for new and adult onset hunters. Guys, this is the latest interview I've ever done, and to be honest, I'm jacked up on Benadryl and prednisone. If you've been following along on Instagram, you know I was hanging tree stands last weekend with my buddy, and we got absolutely destroyed with poison ivy, and I got destroyed with poison ivy in some pretty bad places, so it's been a very long week. But I wanted to get this interview in front of you guys. I'm super excited about it. Tonight's show is going to be all about arrows. So this can be a very overwhelming part of getting into hunting. And honestly, whether you're new or you've been hunting for years, building arrows can just be confusing. So when you go online and you try to do your research, this is one of the most heavily debated topics in hunting. Is it light arrows, heavy arrows, fast arrows, slow arrows? There's no end to what you're going to get. So I wanted to put a third option in front of you. So tell me, are you one of these three people? Either one, you're a new hunter who doesn't understand or know how to build your own arrows, or are you number two? Are you somebody who just doesn't have the time to invest in building arrows? Maybe you've got a family, you've got a full-time job, and you just don't have the time to devote to that. Or you're number three. Honestly, you don't care to build your own arrows. Maybe you would rather have somebody else build them for you so you can just knock tune them and be on your way. Well, if you fall into any of those categories, tonight's show is going to offer you guys a solution to your situation. I'm really excited for our guest tonight because not only does he know about arrows, he runs a company that makes complete arrow systems for you. All you got to do is go on the website, put in a couple specs of your bow, and then voila, in a couple weeks you've got perfect arrows right at your door. Take them out of the package, throw on your field tips. I know in my experience, I didn't have to do a bunch of tuning or anything. They were set up right to the bow that I have, and it saved me a ton of time and headache. So I wanted to let you guys know about this. So with that, let's welcome to the show Isaac Smith, the founder of Vector Custom Shop. Hey Isaac, how's it going, man?
Well, awesome. Thanks for having me, dude. Appreciate it.
So I've been shooting vectors for almost a year now. Like I told you earlier, as a newer hunter, I shied away from the idea of building my own arrows at first because there's so many other things to think about.
Sure.
That honestly, I just didn't want to get into something that was over my head. And so last year, I think I saw, like I told you, might have been Sam Soholt or the Hunting Public. I saw them shooting vector arrows, and I got on there and I checked you guys out, and like I said, after shooting them, not only are these things just, well, for what you've named them, they're hammers. They're tough as nails, but you guys figured out the FOC part of it, which we'll get into later. I mean, it's just a complete arrow that just came to my door. I didn't have to worry about it, and I love them. So I wanted to get you on here for, like I said, a newer hunter who is a little bit shy from the idea of building, and then also, like I said, compared to some other arrow companies you're going to go to, you guys really come in the budget friendly area, and you don't compromise on the quality. So I think for a new guy especially, Vector arrows is an awesome option to have. So
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
I'm going to do a quick prayer and then we'll hop into these questions.
Sounds good.
All right. Lord, I thank you. I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for what he did on the cross in our place. He paid the debt, the ultimate debt that we would have never been able to pay on our own. And I'm just so thankful for that. I thank you for Isaac. I thank you for his willingness to come on here and spend some time with me to help explain a pretty complex part of the game. And it's just awesome that everyone in the hunting community has been so supportive to come on here and help out newer hunters and even older hunters. So I'm just so thankful for him. I ask that you would be over this conversation and you'd just be with us tonight. And we ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So just for starters, I'm just curious, how did the idea of Vector Custom Shop come up?
Oh, man. Well, it was probably back to 4 or 5 years ago. I was just building arrows for myself and for some friends. And just because I'd acquired some of the tools necessary to build my own arrows and was into it and liked to tinker a lot. And but when it came down to building arrows for friends, a lot of times I would just pull up a software called Pinwheel. And it's a cool software. You can get I think they still have like a 10-day free trial. But you install it on your computer. It's like a desktop application, and it's full of different arrow data, as well as like it's brand specific. Like you can pick a Black Eagle X Impact shaft and build it, and it'll show you how much it'll weigh, approximate speed, all that stuff out of your bow. And so you're plugging in, all the specs on your bow, your brace height, ATA, IBO, all these things that most of the time it says all that stuff on the box when you get it, or you can Google those numbers for the model bow you have. But additionally, draw length, draw weight, point weight, insert weight, things like that. You plug it all in, and then you can see on a spectrum, like on either side it's red, and then you get closer to the middle it's yellow, and in the middle it's green. So there's this spectrum where you want your arrow to line up in the middle, and what it's measuring is your dynamic spine,
Okay.
which is how bendy is that arrow when it's ejected from your bow. So if it's super bendy and it looks like a wet noodle when it comes off your bow, then you're underspined, and that's the worst place to be, is underspined. If you're too stiff, that's not really a big deal for tuning, but it's just going to be unnecessarily heavy. And right in the middle or just right of center, like a little bit stiffer than perfect, is normally what I would aim for, because then if I have a buddy who shoots 65 pounds all summer and then he cranks his limb bolts down to 70 and goes hunting, you don't want that then to mean his arrows are underspined or whatever.
Right.
But then also by handling, at this point now, a lot of bow setups for our customers, we know that being too stiff is not really a problem. It's not a problem at all. There's kind of no such thing as too stiff. There's definitely too weak, and that can cause a lot of problems with the arrow retaining all the energy you give it from your bow, but also just like squirrely flight, and quality of flight really is number one. So giving back in the day, I was thinking about what gives my friends setups, the most forgiveness and just the best flight. So yeah, and I was wrong about so many things back then. Now, after building arrows for thousands of people every year, for this is our basically our second full season in business. But before that it was just, I was just tinkering, and it was still called Vector, but it feels like a very different thing now that we have a team and we have a lot more developed on the product. So it's crazy. So yeah, I just started, I'd fletch arrows on Bitzenberger in my house and, glue everything together. And I think it was like late 2019, I made a post in a Facebook group and said, "Hey, I build these arrows. If you want to try them, it's $169 a dozen, I think it was at the start." And, piece by piece, we improved different components. We got the shaft straighter. We got, the components made out of higher grade materials, and also the philosophy changed a lot as we developed the product and got feedback from customers and just learned more about the physics that goes into what we're building. And there's a lot of opinions floating around the internet and YouTube, and it's almost like, I know, right? It's almost like some people out there just want you to feel like you can't kill a deer or anything, with less than, a certain arrow weight or a certain kind of broadhead or whatever. Like, I mean, the truth is people kill animals because they're good at a lot of other things in the woods, and not just because you have, the right arrow. It's not a magic bullet. And I feel like that's kind of the hype around arrows and stuff, and heavy arrows especially, is like just the only way you're going to be successful. It's like totally not true. I don't know. So, and I'm a bit jaded on that at the moment too, so forgive me. But the really what I think it comes down to, and this is something that at Vector we're kind of doubling down on, is it has to be, you have to be tuned. Perfect arrow flight is priority number one for just accuracy and penetration. It has to not break,
Mm-hmm.
and your head has to stay sharp. So you do that, you're good. And with white-tailed deer, what state are you in?
So I am in the whitetail capital of the world. I'm in Iowa.
Oh,
Of
dang,
course,
dude, I'm
I think
so
my
jealous.
area is where all the spikes start, and then as they get bigger, they seem to move south. 'Cause
Right, of course. Yeah.
but yeah, I'm in Iowa, so I pretty much
Awesome.
it's deer, turkey, and then small game in between. But
Super cool. Man, I'm
I,
jealous.
I know what you're talking about from a newer hunter's perspective, especially the marketing that goes on in the hunting community. I think, like in my opinion, as a new set of eyes, kind of like if there's anything wrong with the hunting industry, it is that the marketing of you've got to have either super fast light arrows or super heavy arrows, and
Yeah.
if you shoot a mechanical, you're an idiot. You need to shoot a fixed blade. If you're not shooting,
Right.
a single bevel, you're gonna wound every animal. If you're shooting rage, the rage
Yeah.
isn't gonna open. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I understand I shoot a fixed blade myself because I am a believer of if something can go wrong, I want to go with something where it can't.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
but for every time you hear mechanicals don't open, I haven't heard that many stories. I
Yeah.
mean, they'll
No,
tell
for
you
sure.
there's hundreds of people tell me a year, and it's like I don't know, man, because it seems like a lot of people do pretty well with mechanicals. Not
Yeah,
to
for
mention
sure.
they're a hell of a lot easier to get to fly straight. Just being honest about it.
Yeah, sure.
But
Sure.
yeah, if that's one thing for a newer hunter, like I always want you to do your research, but be aware that when you do research on broadheads or arrows, you are going to be confused as hell. That's one of the main reasons I have Isaac on here because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of this game. Um,
Yeah, Vector does. I
yeah,
mean, that's the goal. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that we're selling something too, but we're trying to sell the easiest road to success. Like your success is what we're trying to reverse engineer. We're not like on this hill, defending this hill of like single bevel broadheads or whatever.
right.
Like we're going to create a very diverse catalog of products and just help people know what to use, and when. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's hard to find a voice you can trust because everybody's selling something, or everybody got something for free, and so they're going to promote it.
right,
There's
right.
there's a lot that's jacked up in our industry.
Yeah,
um,
I was talking to a guy. I shoot a certain broadhead, and I have for a while. And I was talking to him just for the podcast to see if he wanted to come on or have anything to do with the podcast. And he was just like, we're really busy right now, so I can't really do anything now. But he's like, I'm just a little leery because usually you get these top name hunters that say, hey, I want to promote your broadhead. And then when I tell them no, the
yeah,
next day they're promoting some other broadhead. And it's like, so you didn't really believe in my product in the first place. You just wanted my name.
right.
So,
Yeah, that sucks.
but yeah,
Been
guys,
there.
you can, as long as, like Isaac said, as long as your arrow's flying straight and you've practiced and you know where that arrow's going, you're going to kill a deer. If you make a good
Sure.
shot, you could, if you really made a great shot, you could probably kill it with a field tip, to be honest, if you went right through the heart.
Yeah, I mean,
Not that I
actually,
recommend it, but
no, it's definitely illegal. But we've got a
right.
we've got a guy very close to the Vector team, I'll say, who did kill an elk with a field point last year.
Really?
I mean, it was like 6 yard. He'd already wounded it.
Yeah.
He was just like putting it out of its misery, and he had one arrow left that he had
Jeez.
for grouse or something. But that's a different story. I'll let
Yeah.
him tell that to you. Uh, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are very important beyond that. But like the people who kill stuff don't care. It's like some of the most legendary bow hunters um, alive today. Like they shoot just kind of a reasonable light arrow, mechanicals fixed, $30 a pack broadheads,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just killers, man. And there's a lot of other skills to focus on. And that's really what I'm trying to get to is like, if you have something that, and it's not about just like, oh, just get it good enough. And then, you don't have to think about it anymore. It's like, no, like we're trying to create a very high level of performance um, in an automated fashion for our customers. And I believe we've achieved that. But yeah, it's not the magic bullet. So
Right.
yeah.
So, kind of just for the beginning, you kind of already explained it, but at what point did you really start taking vector seriously and I guess go beyond the idea of, hey, I'm just going to build arrows into a system of like what you have now where what's your bow, what's your draw length, poundage, it's actually fairly simple to fill out,
Yeah.
especially, even for a new guy, like all
Right.
you need is very basic information.
Yeah.
How did that idea come about where it's like I said, it's not I'm saying, hey Isaac, I want you to build this specific arrow, but coming up
Right.
with a system of, hey, this is the arrow we recommend for you.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it was the idea from the start. So I was actually on a mountain with my buddy Justin Johnson. We were in Colorado, and I was like, dude, wouldn't it be rad if I could just like build a software that does kind of what Pinwheel does, but you can like plug in your bow specs, but then actually see the arrow, see what it weighs, see the FOC, and then just hit buy now and it shows up built, right? That'd be sick. So I was thinking, I'm going to focus on software and process and manufacturing, and then, and I just, it was a big vision from the start, but slightly wrong vision. And my buddy it was his idea he was like, man, if you're going to put all that work in, you should just design the arrow too and have, build the whole brand around, built to your specs. And it was just like light bulb,
Yeah.
we need to design arrow systems that can be built through a calculator because modern compound bows are so repeatable. They're so consistent. And you can calculate, it's basically an arrow chart. It's a slightly more complex arrow chart. Like, there's charts on, every product page for an arrow you would buy, to assemble it yourself. It'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you how long's your draw length and what's your draw weight. And those charts assume, 100-grain head with a stock insert that's like 11 grains and soft aluminum, right? So if you want to build something more robust, then you have to go to a pinwheel or you have to follow a very manual process where you know, check your bullet hole in paper over and over and you're
Right.
cutting, an eighth of an inch off your arrow at a time and things like that, that it's just kind of not necessary anymore. And it's really more of a recurve traditional type method to tuning your bow. So,
Right.
I mean, the charts work if you're happy with what comes in a box of fletched arrows and you're
Right.
going to shoot a 100-grain head, which, nothing against 100-grain heads. I think 100 or 125 is pretty much all you need, for almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the insert's an extremely important piece of your arrow and it holds everything together. And so we wanted to make an extremely tough insert, and that's going to be, 55 grains, 75 grains. And so or to have multiple weights of inserts. So like right now you can get an aluminum or titanium insert and it's 35 or 55 grains, but the customer doesn't even get to pick that. Like, we calculate how heavy should your insert be according to your bow, draw length, draw weight, point weight. That's what determines spine, length of the arrow, and your insert weight. And then you can see right on the page when you order what it'll weigh, what the FOC is, which is just another funny thing that people care too much about. Um, and then if you check out, and we'll completely assemble them, fletch them, cut them to length, epoxy your inserts in, and you get a fully built set of arrows that is built to your specs, right to your door. So
Yeah.
that's the whole idea. I mean, it's been pretty much the vision from the start. Like, I didn't think it would work so fast. Like, people really caught on to it, and I'm really grateful for the support of so many early adopters. And but yeah, the feedback's been awesome. We have a ridiculously high customer satisfaction rate, and even with lessons that we're learning along the way, like we've had our bouts of trying a technique, and then things get through quality control, but 2 weeks later veins pop off, or just total nightmare problems. But like, it's gotten to a very, very interesting place where, I mean, our shop is almost surgical. We went and built our own machines to fletch arrows, so that's extremely precise and repeatable. We have just we track climate control in the room, every day through an app that we got that is monitoring all the climate specs in our room, temperature and humidity and all that stuff, and we're watching that because that changes how the glue cures and everything. And it's kind of nuts, but man, it's come a long way.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to touch on with you, when you hear the term FOC,
Yeah,
why don't you, if you could, just explain what it is, and the idea
sure.
behind it on both sides? Because I know you have your guys who really don't care about it. You have
Yeah,
your guys that just think a heavy arrow in general is good, and then you have your guys who want extreme FOC, where they're running 100 grain insert with a 350 grain head. So could you just kind of explain just
yeah,
FOC in general?
yeah. FOC it stands for front of center, so it's a percentage that indicates how much of your arrow weight is allocated to the front of that arrow. So, like, um, if you had a 500 grain HMR and a 500 grain ZMR, the ZMR is built on, that's our arrow that's a lighter shaft. But if you had it the same weight, then you'd have probably more point weight. I don't know if that's the best way to explain that, but um, you know, Dr. Ed Ashby popularized um, the concept, and others as well. I mean, it was an argument for a long time among traditional bow hunters. What was the most effective, um, way to build an arrow and stuff, and decades ago there was this international conversation about, is bow hunting even ethical, right? Just shoot it with a gun. They're like, why would you want to just stick it with a sharp stick and then watch it suffer? Like, and bow hunting was illegal in most of the world until guys like Ashby went and did a lot of research and proved that it was an extremely ethical and effective way to kill big game animals. So a lot is a lot of a debt is owed to Ed Ashby, but also he used relatively low poundage traditional bows. Like he shot, you know, um, the biggest game in the world with a longbow, and
I was gonna
that's
say, isn't
super rad. But like, it's a very different tool and a different application. And here we're shooting, you know, a much more advanced bow, a energy machine, at relatively small animals, like even the biggest whitetail buck. Like, you know, it's not a impala. You know, it's way smaller than your average impala. So, or you know, pretty much most African game. So, um, but yeah, FOC. The Ashby studies would suggest that a higher FOC gives you better penetration, so more weight up front of your arrow. And the caveat is you can't just like put a heavier point in front of your arrow, because the more weight you add to the front, the weaker your dynamic spine gets. And that's what, like I was saying before, like if you have a weak spine, then that arrow is just bending too much, and you're going to have a heck of a time tuning it, and it's just going to look like a wet noodle flying through the air. And that is, you know, one of the best ways to have a bad time in bow hunting. So, because you're gonna bleed energy and not have the penetration that you expect, even with high FOC. So, I when I started Vector, I thought heavy arrows, high FOC, you know, is, you know, the way to go. And while there's some benefits to shooting heavy arrows, I think that a reasonable middle ground weight is what helps people be most successful. It's between 450 and 550 grains for pretty much anything on the planet if you shoot, you know, the average compound bow setup, which is 60 to 70 pounds, you know, for, you know, an adult size draw length. Like, yeah. And I don't know, I've come down off that high a little bit with the heavy arrow thing. And part of that too was I just, you know, people on the internet always freaking talking about how hard it is to get a pass through on a hog. And, you know, I've been to Texas a bunch of times shooting pigs, wild hogs, and got on some real big ones. And I've never like not had a pass through. And I would attribute that more to my broadhead than the arrow, honestly, because I mean, this last time I was there was last February, and I shot 6 pigs with a 438 grain arrow, which I was nervous going down there with that light of an arrow. But I had the iron wills on the front, and those things are just like scalpels. And you could practically, like, I've done it, like standing next to a dead animal, like the arrow that has already been through a giant hog. Like I can just I could take 2 fingers and hold that arrow and push it through that pig. You know,
yeah.
the head is so important, and there's a lot of good ones, and there's some really not good ones too. And um, but man, if you're tuned, if your arrow's flying perfect, and all that energy is just going in a straight line, man, and you have a good head that'll stay sharp all the way through. It's not something that you have to worry about or fight about on the internet. So
Yeah. So
uh,
I was gonna say, I think from the research I've done, and before I picked your guys' arrows up, when I told you I shot a different company,
yeah,
um, I was shooting because I'm sure he's never going to hear this podcast, so I'll just name drop. I was following Ranch Fairy, so
yeah,
you know, and he gets a lot of shit online, and I get it
yeah.
because you know his personality can. I personally I don't mind it, but
I think he's awesome. I think
yeah,
he's hilarious.
yeah, he's
He's
hilarious.
wrong. He's wrong about a lot of stuff. But I like him a lot. I just met him for the first time in person this last year, and
Yeah,
he's a great guy. Great guy.
yeah. He seems like, I mean, regardless of your position on some of the topics he discusses, I mean, he is very big on razor sharp broadheads, which I think everyone can agree on.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
that's very important. But I being brand new, I know he was doing stuff with the hunting public, and I mean,
Yeah.
that's a one of the big places I learned how to hunt. And so I jumped on that train for a while, and last year I was shooting like a 685 grain arrow, and I can't remember what the FOC was, but it was Ranch Fairy approved, and
Yeah.
I I got to the point where it's like you were saying, there's that happy medium where like, will a 685 grain arrow penetrate through a deer? Hell yes, it will. But
Yeah. And the
you're
log
gonna give
behind it,
up,
man.
yeah, you're gonna give up speed. You're gonna give up your effective range to a certain extent.
Totally.
And yeah, it for all of us who are just deer hunting, it's a little bit overkill. And
Yeah.
I, like I said, I I think from my understanding of it anyway, is that the idea of a super heavy FOC or a super high FOC, super heavy broadhead and insert, like you mentioned, that was done a lot of testing. Now I don't think Ashby's incorrect, but like you said, that was on like a traditional longbow, not a 70 to 80 pound compound. So my understanding is the lighter your draw weight is, now probably that higher FOC heavy front end probably plays a bigger part. But not many of us are hunting with those, so it's been
Yeah. Let's do an experiment.
Yeah.
Let's do an experiment here. I'm looking up a calculator here. I think, yeah, realtree.com has a kinetic energy and momentum calculator. So let's look at, so I have a recurve bow set up that I love. It's a 54 pound recurve, and I shoot at one time I shot a 600 grain arrow out of it. It's a little less now, but that was like 160 feet per second. So I'm going to type in, I've got two fields here: arrow weight 600 grains and arrow speed 160. So 600 grain arrow would be that Ashby approved weight range. He said 650 grains was that weight threshold that would break bones, right? The bone breaking threshold. But so okay, let's look at this. So I get 34.1 foot-pounds of kinetic energy and 0.42 slugs of momentum. So everybody wants to talk about momentum and say, that's what is most important. So let's just look at that. So, okay, now we're going to look at my 438 grain arrow, and I shoot that at 276 feet per second out of my compound. I'm going to click generate. Oh, I think I have to refresh the page. So before it was 0.42. All right, here we go. I got to retype the 438 grains, and that was 276 feet per second. And I chronographed these. My momentum went up to 0.53 slugs. So I have more momentum, and I mean, it's 74 foot-pounds of kinetic energy as well as more than that other arrow. But just to watch that momentum go from 0.43, was it 0.4 something
like that,
to 0.53, and I took off 160 grains. The difference is what's launching it, not the arrow. And so I don't know, man.
So for people who aren't really,
there's some translation that is required, and you can't just copy and paste all of Ashby's philosophy and research and findings. And as valuable as it is, you can't copy and paste it into a modern compound bow context and just expect the same results. You're really, really handicapping yourself.
Yeah. Can you quickly just like define kinetic energy and momentum? Like, that's one thing that gets talked about a lot, and especially in the aero debates, that those terms get thrown around like crazy. For a newer guy who has no clue what that even means, can you just kind of explain kinetic energy and momentum and what those mean in the context of an aero?
um, I think you should save this question for another guest you need to have on is my partner Ben.
Yeah.
He loves this stuff and he'll explain it super well for you. Um, I think he'd be better to get into the nitty gritty on the
Yeah.
physics there. He'll get pretty fiery about it too. But basically, the kinetic energy is what the guys who want to shoot light and fast care about, and momentum is what the guys who want to shoot slow and heavy and break bones, that's what they care about. And really, just a happy medium is, I think, what makes the most sense. It's like the term adult arrows has been like coined and thrown
Yeah.
around, and like the joke is that if you're an adult, you shoot an adult arrow, that means it's like heavy and grown up. But adults don't do what's extreme, they do what's reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
And
good point.
yeah, so I don't know. Um I think if you look at any one thing to the extreme and forget everything else, then you're missing something. So,
Yeah.
and you mentioned Ranch Fairy, and he's great uh, in a lot of ways, but he'll say on his videos all the time, "I'm not a form guy. I'm not. I don't tune my own bows and stuff. I can't remember him saying that word for word to be um, real about that, but like he talks about that all the time, and
Well, he's heavy. He's
he's
real
open
heavy
about
on the
it.
human element of a shot. He does mention that a lot of how it seems like the lighter you go. I don't know if what he's meaning is form flaws show up a lot more on a lighter arrow. If maybe he's thinking like a heavier FOC straightens your arrow out a little bit. I don't know, but I do
Well,
know he mentions like you're human. Remember, you're human every time you take a shot. So I know that's one thing he's big on, but
yeah, you can build a lot of forgiveness into your setup, but like I think because he is tuning his setup with the arrow, he's literally coming at tuning his setup from a like you would tune a recurve,
mm,
by adjusting that arrow till it comes off the bow plumb. So, but now you should build your arrows from a chart and then adjust your compound bow. Like anybody could look at a compound bow and be like, "Oh man, that thing's literally made to be adjusted."
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's all there's yeah 1,000 ways you can um, adjust and get things to fit just right. So I don't know. We see things differently. I'd love to break it down with him sometime, and but you know he's pretty connected with another aero company,
yeah,
which there's a lot of amazing aero companies, and we all sell a fairly similar product, um, but the thing that Vector is most focused on is paying attention to what happens afterwards. Like this is kind of brand new. I actually just a minute ago got a text that the website is live, but um, we just went and built a whole new platform. Um, and we'll be talking about this in the next couple of weeks on the internet, but we just built a whole other platform for tracking data about what happens afterwards. Like, um, so that when you shoot a deer, you start a log entry and tell us what happened, like where you hit it, how far, how good was the blood trail, of course, like what broadhead did you use, what angle did you hit it at, did you hit major bones, did you hit small bones, how far did it run, did you get pass through or not, like all these things, because we want to be able to extrapolate data like Ashby did,
yeah.
but in a modern in a modern context. And so we're trying to build a vault of data. And on one hand, we've done that with arrow setups, and we're able to see, from many thousands now of customers that we've built arrows for, like that certain things work really good and seem to be like um, a safe range, right? And certain extremes, we're trying to weed those out. So that's why like we don't build arrows for 200 grain heads anymore. We just canceled 200 grain heads like 2 weeks ago because like 80% of our support tickets were because of 200 grain heads. So like people having a hard time getting them to fly good, or just not satisfied with how short their range was, not being able to shoot past 30, 40 yards. Um, and um, and also just like that head being so long out in front, it's like just adds a ton of leverage on your components. So you're going to break your arrows more.
Right.
Um, so yeah, we're trying to weed out those extremes so that we keep giving our customers the thing that will help them be most successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I one of the things I was curious about, just speaking specifically to the arrows. So your guys's are a .166 inside diameter, correct?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
then one of the things that if you look, the actual carbon or whatever of the arrow is much thicker
Yeah.
than. So I was curious, how do you? I don't even know where you would start from your shoes of like picking the right arrow material or however you even come across getting it. But what was the idea behind making that thicker arrow? Like, how did that come about?
A couple things. So, um, we started to learn about, before even launching Vector, what makes an arrow, what can make a carbon fiber shaft stronger. And obviously, like a thicker wall is, it's a no-brainer. It's like,
Mm.
if the wall of that shaft is twice as thick, it's going to be more durable. Um, but also, just a related factor of that is um, whether it's like a high or low modulus carbon, which is just the density at which that carbon is wrapped around the mandrel. So, and this is another thing that Ben can speak to probably a lot better than me specifically. But what we also wanted was to find a correlation between like forgiveness in an arrow system and the type of carbon that is used to make it. So we played with it a bunch, and at this point, I'm very convinced that that lower modulus carbon fiber is way easier to tune and just more forgiving for a setup, which is contrasted with something that would be a very light uh, arrow, like you think of a lot of the micro shafts that are available on the market today. They're a small diameter and they're very light. Even if it's like a 250 spine, it's like the GPI weight of like our 350 or 400 spine. Like,
Mm.
so, but the result is, even though it's stiff and light, it's very brittle. So we wanted to make something that was very robust and like and forgiving, and we were okay with it weighing a little bit more because we want to keep our customers between like 440 and 560 grains most of the time. Um, and just because, that's where we see people just having the best experience. And but that's a big weight range still. Like you can still have the arrow you want. Like, but we're just creating those guardrails. So the heavier, thick wall, low modulus shaft tended to be just extremely forgiving, and um, I'm 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 not sure if we could have done it with a larger inner diameter shaft, because then it would just be so big and bulky.
You'd be shooting a
So
target arrow.
yeah, it would just feel like it's a very large diameter because you make it a larger inner diameter and then you have that much material in the walls, then it would just feel really big. So yeah, so we made it on the micro size, and there's lighted Knox available in that size still and stuff, um and the components was a whole nother endeavor, but yeah, that's kind of the thought that went into developing the carbon. And that was all discoveries made with the HMR, which is like a heavier shaft. And then we wanted to make the same thing but one step lighter, so we went and to one type of carbon, less low modulus, you know and it ends up a grain per inch lighter in the ZMR. And you see it in the durability. Like, I've broken one HMR in 4 years, and I've broken maybe 6 ZMRs. Like, you go to that higher modulus carbon, even just a little bit, like they're both still very low modulus, but you see the durability kind of change. So
Yeah.
which is a factor, and it's super important. Like, it's still way more durable than most carbon shafts on the market today, but I don't know, I think I've been spoiled by that hammer, the
Yeah.
HMR, because
Yeah.
people just don't break them. It's crazy.
I was getting nervous. I was watching so I was in Total Archery Challenge in Michigan, and
Yeah,
I was watching, I think it was a video from Total Archery Challenge. A dude was shooting them over and over and over at that metal target. And like the dude
yeah,
I don't remember, was that
awesome.
you maybe, or I don't know who it was, but he shot it like
No,
9 times, and I'm like,
yeah,
I would be scared to death to shoot an arrow after hitting metal, like.
yeah, dude.
But that
Yeah,
thing, it
and
took.
that was the ZMR, the one that
Was it?
should be easier to break. Yeah,
Yeah.
he shot the Iron Rhino like 8 or 9 times before it broke, and he kept doing it too. And I he's a friend of mine, and he kind of he knew he could get some more, so I think he
Yeah.
just wanted to blow everybody's mind. But he had a crowd. He had like 100 people around, just like,
I was
what the
praying to
heck is
God
it doing?
that thing didn't splinter through his hand. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
but it
there's a
didn't.
video. Yeah, no, it doesn't. I mean, it could, but yeah, right. Thank God it didn't. I did the same thing at TAC this year at a couple different TACs, and just I stop at 3 shots, maybe 4 most of the time, because I'm freaked out
Yeah.
by sending it through my hand. But yeah, man, they're super tough, and um, you can see clips of that on our Instagram. Um, but yeah, it's fun. I mean, they got to fly good, and not break, and then shoot a super super sharp head that stays sharp, which means high quality materials. Um,
Now, seeing
and
you
there's
guys have kind of, I don't know if you've kind of partnered with Iron Will, or you're
yeah,
offering. So, but then I've also seen, are you guys coming out with your own broadheads too?
yeah, yeah. Bill from Iron Wills helped us a lot with a bunch of different stuff, and he's just a super super smart guy, and so we ask him questions a lot, and he's been a helpful resource and kind of mentor, whether he would call it that or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, we had our broadheads developed and prototyped before we met him, and sat on our broadheads for 8 months while we tried to figure out who are we. Are we the arrow company that all the Iron Will customers relate with and use, like, because they're expensive heads, they're worth every penny, um, and they're perfect, but it turns out that our customers tend to um, be slightly different customers than Iron Will has. Just it's a slightly different niche, so um, it's not a more or less difference. It's just our customers appreciate that we've done the research and we can handle parts of this for them. And iron will customers tend to like to have their hands on every piece of their setup, right? And so I think they're building their own arrows a lot more of the time. But nonetheless, we created a version of the ZMR that you can get on our site that has it's compatible with his Snyder core heads, which is pretty much the most bomb proof and awesome component system ever made. So it's perfect.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little more pricey, but it's just freaking worth it. So,
well, it's like I've heard a million times, your arrow is what's killing the animal. And
sure, it does all the work.
Yeah, you got all these guys that get these expensive bows, they trick them out, they got just whatever, the most expensive stabilizers, they got the most expensive sights, blah blah blah, and then they shoot a shitty arrow, or they shoot I'm not
something
saying
out of a box from Dick's Sporting Goods.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I got a buddy that shoots I can't even remember what they're called, but they're from Walmart. They're broadheads from Walmart, and it's like, sure, he kills deer with them. I can't debate that, but
right.
You spend all this money on all your gear and your camo matches, and you got the lightest saddle setup or whatever, hang tree stand, whatever, and then you cheap out on the arrow. And it's like, that's what kill, or specifically the broadhead too. But like, that's the actual tool that kills the deer. That's where you should be focusing, guys. If you're going to budget things, in hunting, which for a lot of guys, it's important. I'm not a millionaire, so I can't just buy everything. And it's like, if you're going to allocate money in your budget, a big part of your budget should be allocated towards good arrows and good broadheads,
For sure. Yeah, and iron wills, I mean, you can pretty much put iron wills on any arrow that's tuned well and have the utmost confidence. So, they're the best heads ever made, in my opinion.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So my final question is, and I don't know if it's still the same, so what you guys are still putting out or not, component wise, mine was like a Ethics insert with like a collar over. Are you guys still doing that type of system? Because I know on my previous arrow it was a half out. And there's a lot of debate that goes into that too. What do you guys kind of do? What have you found over time to be the most effective, and what are you guys moving forward with right now?
Yeah. So first of all, I should mention bow companies get to make a new model every year. Like, that's kind of what we're doing. We're making incremental updates to the design and the system every off season. So the components is something that changed this last off season. We added the ZMR, and then we made an update to the HMR, and we call it HMR version 2. It's got the new components, and that's something we redesigned. We left Ethics. We're not using their components that they designed anymore. This is something that we came up with. We have them machined. Nobody else has the OPC, the one piece component. So it's basically it's one piece, not an insert and an outsert. It's just like an outsert that has the threads in the front. And it just helps us get things spinning straighter, faster. And it makes the whole arrow system stronger than having that insert component in there. So, stronger and straighter, basically, and lighter. We went from having most of our arrows shipped with either 65 grains or 105 grains in the insert alone, and now it's either 35 or 55, and it's stronger. So
well, I mean, I think that's one good thing, or one, I don't want to say noble thing about your company, but some people, especially in the arrow, get dug into one position, and it's like, you guys are like, you know what, we found something better, we're going that direction, versus I know there's better, but I've already dug myself so far into a 700 grain arrow. This is what our company is. I like that you guys are dynamic and saying, hey, we found something better for you guys, So we're going in that direction versus just standing your ground in a bad position, which a lot of
Yeah,
companies and people are doing.
for sure. And I'll give you the good and the bad of that reality. Is that the good is that we're trying to follow the data. We're looking at what is helping people have a good experience, be lethal and effective, and enjoy shooting like a lot. Like, because if you don't enjoy shooting your 700 grain arrow, then you're not going to do it that much. Like,
Right.
so, which was my experience because I liked it when I'd shoot a whitetail at 15 to 24 yards, but I didn't enjoy just shooting like all summer with a 700 grain arrow. I'd go shoot a 440 grain arrow for Total Archery Challenge and all these things. And then, begrudgingly switch to my hunting arrow,
Right.
but yeah, little did I know, not really necessary. But
Yeah.
so that's the good thing is following the data, right, to make improvements. The bad thing is, and this is something that I am just not pumped about, is that people can't come back from the previous year and just get more of the same arrow they already had. Like, we get a lot of people asking for the same arrow they had last year with ethics components, and we're like, guys, we went and made it better, and they're like, yeah, but I liked it and I just want more of the same thing, and I'm already
Yeah.
set up for it. So sorry to those people, but we went and made it better, you know and it's worth changing.
Yeah.
When,
Yeah.
once you're through your set and you lose or break some percentage of your set of arrows from last year, like, then make an upgrade with us, right?
Right.
And see what kind of improvements we've made. And we've got some pretty next level improvements to make for next year that is just going to be just different. And
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. And so yeah, maybe I can come back and tell you about that when we're ready to talk about it.
Yeah. That would be awesome. Yeah, I would say just if the guys that on the, I guess you would call the professionals that shoot your guys' arrows
Yeah.
aren't enough proof for you guys listening. I'm nobody. I am going into my third year of deer hunting, but I shoot them, and I can tell you from my perspective, they have been much easier on the budget than some that I've had made. They've flown better. They tuned faster. Like I said, they're strong as you can get. I have had absolutely zero problems, and that's coming from me. And like I've told you guys on other podcasts, nobody's paying me to give reviews. I'm just
Good.
trying to tell you guys. Yeah, I'm just trying to tell you guys what's worked for me in my journey as a newer hunter. And for the money, I mean, the money's not even, that's like the bonus, because these are just such kick-ass arrows, and then they don't cost $400 a dozen. Like, for me, that was a huge, huge part of it. So if you guys,
Right.
like I said in the intro, if you're someone who just has no interest, or you don't know where to go to build, because I mean, there is fun in building your own arrows. I for a Total Archery Challenge, I didn't, but I wanted to build some 3D arrows just to try it
Yeah.
out.
Sure.
But I'm just not confident enough in it to do it for something that I'm slinging at an actual animal. And I have
Yeah.
nothing but the most confidence in your guys' arrows. And
Thank
it
you.
just, as a newer guy, it takes such a huge weight off your shoulders to not have to worry about that. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I couldn't more highly recommend them for really anybody.
I appreciate that. Yeah. One thing I just want to add is that, like, I have a pretty high standard for myself. I shoot arrows straight out of the website. Like, it is, we went and built the process and the calculation and system, and then also the arrows on the hardware side, like, that we want to use. Like, we're not tinkering and doing extra stuff. Like, I put in an order on the website, and then the guys in the shop make it, and I pick up the box. Like, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And like, the results are insane. Like, I do tinker with my bow still to get tuned up real good, and and get, but maybe not as much as I even used to. Like now I just make sure my broadheads group with my field points,
Right.
and I move my rest around to do that and like hit the woods, and it just freaking works. So, but also like, yeah, you said there's some big names using our arrows, and these are guys who also have a very, very high standard for accuracy, and they're taking,
they make their living off of hunting. They have to.
For sure. Yeah. Yep. It's about that shot, working. But like, I think of Donnie Drake from Elk 101. I was just hanging with him at Total Archery Challenge a few weeks ago in Montana, and he was just like, man, I used to spend so much time working on my arrows, building my arrows, and now they just show up and they fly as good as anything I ever built. But they're tougher.
Yeah.
And the components are stronger. And Brian Barney, legendary mule deer hunter, says the same thing. He's built arrows for 20 years, and these he finds are as accurate as anything he could have put together on his own. And yeah, so it's pretty precise. It's pretty precise. It's not you're not paying us to assemble your arrows.
Right.
You're gonna pay us to give you an arrow that will outshoot you,
right.
Hopefully, and you can grow into. So,
well,
that's the goal.
That was another important thing for me being newer. Like I kind of have learned how to tune my bow. But the one thing I liked about the way you guys do it is, in my previous arrow, we built the arrow, I got it in. It was so much different than where my bow was set up for, that I had to spend forever, especially as a new guy who's not really sure what I'm doing, trying to tune the bow to the arrow. Whereas your guys is, I told you what my bow was, it came in, and there was only one out of the 12 I had to knock tune.
That's awesome.
Came off
Love
perfect.
To hear it.
So
yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time here.
You're good, man.
What kind of,
it's been fun.
We're coming up on season. What kind of lead time would people be looking at right now if they put in an order? Well, I guess you guys actually do drops right now because they can't keep them on the shelf. But
we have to kind of keep our foot on the brake pedal a little bit, because we don't want to just keep selling arrows and keep extending the lead time, which we're already behind our lead time right now, to be honest. Like, but we're running, close to 2 full shifts and just cranking out as much as we can. And for a while we only had 2 fletching machines, and now we have 8, we're ramping things up. But it's about 2 weeks, 2.5 sometimes.
Awesome.
To get arrows built to your specs.
So where can everybody find you guys on Instagram or online? And then let everybody know the website so they can come check you guys out.
It's Vector Arrows everywhere. VectorArrows.com, Instagram Vector Arrows. And YouTube too. We're gonna be dropping regular behind the scenes videos with what we're working on, what we're killing. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, guys. Well, hey, thanks for tuning into the show, and thank you, Isaac, for coming on here and spending time with me.
Heck yeah.
Like I always say, I appreciate every one of you guys that listen to this show. I really, really mean that. So make sure you're following around. Mess that up. Make sure you're following along on Instagram. That's at Antler Feather Co. We're on YouTube. That's Antler and Feather Co. One word with the and sign. I found if you try to type it differently, you're going to have a hard time finding me on there. But yeah, check us out there. And please, if you would, wherever you're listening to this podcast, give it 5 stars, leave a good review. Make sure you're following and subscribing so you guys don't miss any of the awesome content we have coming out. And we will catch you guys next week. This is the Antler and Feather Co. podcast. You are listening to the Antler and Feather Co. podcast.